Hello everybody and welcome back. In today's video, I'll be taking you on a bit of a different excursion. We're not visiting a football stadium, but we are visiting something football related, and if you're a massive football fan like me, I think you'll agree with me when I say that I think we've struck gold. In my adventures through the streets of Madrid, I found a pretty neat museum in the center of the Spanish capital. This museum is the most complete collection of historical football pieces being displayed all throughout seven floors, much larger than what it may have seemed on the outside. Seriously, my wife and I went in here not knowing what to expect, and after 2 hours, we were blown away by just how much they were able to fit in this space. It's filled with match-worn relics, immersive experiences, and fun interactive games all aimed to teach you about the history of the beautiful game. The name truly is fitting. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to quite possibly the greatest football museum on the planet, Legends Home of Football, presented by La Liga. You can buy the tickets in advance online on their official website, or you can do what we did and just walk in and buy the tickets there and then. Staff are incredibly nice and they will accommodate you accordingly. Once you check in with your ticket, you're taken to a small theater that plays a short film about the history of the greatest game ever created, how the beautiful game was invented, and important dates as well as highlights and icons throughout history. It pretty much sets the tone for the ultimate football experience you're about to embark on. Once you're done with that, you're free to begin the museum experience on your own. Here is a match-worn and signed jersey of my favorite footballer of all time, the one and only Ronaldinho. I'm going to try my best and remember not to say match-worn before every jersey because they're all match-worn and that would get pretty redundant. Right off the bat, I'm very happy to see that they have my country's jersey on display. Let's go, USA! Through this corridor, you see many memorabilia, and here's some from Argentina. And here is a replica of the Euro Cup as we go through the Euro section of the museum. This trophy is known as the Henry Delany Trophy, which is given to the winner of the European Championships, aka the Euros. It was named after the first General Secretary of UEFA who came up with the idea of the tournament, but sadly passed away before the competition officially began. Played every 4 years, the first Euros took place in 1960, hosted by France, and it was won by the Soviet Union. Since then, the nations that have won the Euros have been Spain with a record 4 titles, Germany with 3, Italy along with France have won it twice, and Netherlands, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Russia, Greece, Denmark, and Portugal have all won the Euros once. And this is a very cool hall exhibit that commemorates those champions. Here's a jersey of Greece in the Euros 2004 when they pulled off what is, in my opinion, the greatest upset in Euros history against the host and favorites that year, Portugal. Sorry to my Portuguese subscribers for bringing up bad memories. But speaking of Portugal, as we look through past European champions, we reach 2016 where we have the jersey of the top scorer in Euros history, the GOAT Cristiano Ronaldo, when he gave Portugal their first and only ever Euros in history. Here's a jersey of Italy when they won their second Euros in 2020, and here is Casillas' jersey when Spain won the Euros in 2012 against, funny enough, Italy. Now moving on to the Americas, we go to see the wonderful rich history of the legendary Copa America. Beginning more than a century ago in 1916, the Copa America is the world's oldest international football tournament, and the inaugural champions were none other than the great Uruguay, who also won the first World Cup in history. Shout out to any of my Uruguayan subscribers, arriba la garra charrúa. The trophy, which in my opinion is the most beautiful looking trophy in football, unpopular opinion I know, don't come at me, was made between 1916 and 1917 at Casa Escasani, a jewelry store in Buenos Aires, for a price of about 3,000 Swiss francs at the time. One of the most distinguishing features of this trophy, and one that make it my favorite, are the levels used to commemorate past champions. And speaking of, the champions of the Copa America are Argentina with a record 16, Uruguay in second with 15, Brazil with 9, Paraguay, Chile, and Peru with 2, and Colombia alongside Bolivia with just 1 win each. Really awesome to have been able to stand in front of the jersey of the GOAT, Lionel Andrés Messi, when he won his first ever international trophy with Argentina back in 2021 against eternal rivals Brazil. Of course, since we are in the heart of Spain, we have an entire exhibit hall dedicated to the accomplishments and history of the Spanish national team, nicknamed La Furia Roja, which translates to the Red Fury. There's even a small film played recounting the story of the greatest accomplishment in Spanish football's history, the World Cup back in 2010. Man, what a magical World Cup that was, huh? Who could forget the vuvuzelas in South Africa, Shakira's iconic Waka Waka song, as well as Kanan's waving flag? Honestly, that has been my favorite World Cup to this date. Here, I'm standing in front of the match-worn and signed jersey of the greatest goalkeeper in Spain's history, Iker Casillas. And here is a match-worn jersey of Spain's greatest player ever, in my opinion, the great Andres Iniesta. Moving along, we pass by an exhibit for the Spanish league La Liga, showcasing all of the team's jerseys, but of course the main ones being Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Atletico de Madrid. Spain really does have a rich footballing history, filled with some of the biggest superstars the game has ever produced. One thing I really appreciate about Legends is how it really does take into account football from all parts of the world, and it was pretty nice to see a small exhibit dedicated to the leagues of my part of the world, Major League Soccer and La Liga MX. In my opinion, La Liga MX is pretty underrated, as it is the most popular league in the Americas, and those who may not know, America vs Chivas is the Mexican Clásico and one of the greatest club rivalries in world football. Speaking of world football, we move on to the exhibit of the greatest club competition in the world outside of Europe, La Gloria Eterna, the Eternal Glory, the legendary and prestigious Copa Libertadores. Organized by CONMEBOL every year since 1960, the Copa Libertadores is the highest level of competition in South American club football. The most successful team in this prestigious tournament is Argentina's Club Atlético Independiente, having won it a record 7 times. Second on the list is one of the most iconic clubs in international football, the great Boca Juniors with 6, and third is the pride of Uruguay, Peñarol with 5. Here's a picture of one of the fiercest rivalries in world football, Boca Juniors versus River Plate, 2 greats from Argentina. As you keep moving along, you see more jerseys of great South American champions. Here you have a jersey of another great Uruguayan club, Club Nacional de Fútbol, and here you have a familiar jersey for football fans in the early 2010s, as Neymar Santos would win the Copa Libertadores in 2011. One thing I loved about the Legends experience is that every now and then at the end of an exhibit, they give you a chance to go into a small theater where you basically get a quick but fun summary of what you just observed. In this particular case, we're waiting at the end of the Copa Libertadores exhibit to see a 4D film summarizing this prestigious tournament. Now, I had never been in a 4D theater before, and let me tell you, I was thrilled the entire time. For those who don't know what 4D is, just think of 3D taken up to a higher notch. It's like a small roller coaster ride with gusts of wind and water being sprayed in your face every now and then. It was absolutely phenomenal, and you definitely shouldn't skip it, which is what I almost did. Thankfully, I did not, and it was a great time. Staying in CONMEBOL, we now go to the Copa Sudamericana exhibit, which is the second highest level of competition in South American club football. To help better understand the competitions in CONMEBOL for those who are more familiar with European football, think of the Copa Libertadores as the great Champions League and the Copa Sudamericana as the next big thing, like the Europa League. The Copa Sudamericana began in 2002, and the 3 most successful clubs are Liga Deportiva Universitaria Quito from Ecuador and Argentina's Club Atlético Independiente and Boca Juniors, who all share 2 Copa Sudamericanas each. Speaking of second-tier competitions, we go back to Europe and look at the exhibit dedicated to the Europa League. It started out in 1971 as simply the UEFA Cup and was later rebranded as the UEFA Europa League in 2009. The most successful teams in this competition are Sevilla with a staggering 7 titles, more than twice the amount than the following 4 teams who all have 3 titles each, and those teams would be Inter de Milan, Liverpool, Juventus, and Atletico de Madrid. Now, halfway through this tour, I had to stop and really think just how amazing and unreal it is that Legends was able to collect all of this historic memorabilia. For example, I was in awe when I saw that they had a match-worn Diego Armando Maradona Napoli jersey when Napoli won their first and only European title in 1989 with the Europa League. It really made me wonder what the process is to authenticate all of this, and more importantly, how are they able to obtain it? I do know a lot of times professional players come in and check out this amazing museum and will usually donate some of their memorabilia, but when it comes to much older relics, I just really love to know how they're able to get a hold of them. I know this one isn't as old, but like this match-worn Valencia jersey from Pablito Aimar, an Argentinian icon and one of Messi's favorite players growing up, fun fact. Finally, we make it to the greatest annual club football competition in the world, the prestigious and highly coveted UEFA Champions League. After the success of the South American Championship of Champions in 1948, the predecessor of the Copa Libertadores basically, UEFA started to consider a tournament to see which team was the best in all of Europe. It was actually put into practice after some people were annoyed that Wolverhampton Wanderers were being called the champions of the world after beating several other teams from different European countries. So to really see who was the best, the Champions League was founded in 1955 in Paris as the European Champions Clubs Cup. It was later rebranded in 1992 as what we know it today, the Champions League. One out of the many awesome things you get to do at Legends Museum is take a picture with the Champions League. How incredible is that? Once you take it, you're able to pick up your picture right at the end of the tour. Absolutely unreal to think that my beautiful wife Maddie and I have touched this gorgeous cup more times than some teams have in the last decade. Jokes, just jokes, people. I'm only joking. Or am I? Take it as you may, but going back to the tournament itself, the most successful clubs in European history are Real Madrid with an astounding 15, more than twice as much as the club in second place, which is the legendary AC Milan with 7. And next, you have the amazing clubs of Liverpool and Bayern Munich tied for third place with 6 titles to each of their names. This hall has the jerseys of all the great Champions League winning squads of the past. Here, for example, you have the father of modern football, the great Johan Cruyff. I'm sure this one will bring good memories to my Chelsea fans. Up the Blues. And here we have the last Italian club to win the Champions League, the amazing treble-winning Inter de Milan, managed by the special one, Jose Mourinho. Like I said, you have many more amazing jerseys in this hall that we could honestly spend all day talking about. Moving on to the FIFA portion of the museum, we head to international club competitions with the Intercontinental Cup and the Club World Cup. Ooh boy, this is going to be pretty tricky to explain, but I'll give it my best shot. At the time of making this video, it is March 2025, just months away from the brand new competition introduced by FIFA as the Club World Cup. Hey, wait a minute, Johnny. I thought Real Madrid just won the Club World Cup back in December 2024 against the Mexican side Pachuca. Well, I wouldn't blame you for thinking that because if you type in Real Madrid versus Pachuca on Google, even they seem to be confused because they label it as the Club World Cup as well. But no, technically Real Madrid won the Intercontinental Cup. Now this may confuse you even more because it's the Intercontinental Cup, but they're using the Club World Cup format we've known for years and are even using the exact same Club World Cup trophy we've known for years. So to make this make as much sense as possible, I'll put it in chronological order for you guys. The Intercontinental Cup began in 1960 as a one-off game between the winners of the Champions League and the Copa Libertadores to see who really was the greatest club in the world, and it lasted until 2004. During this time, the most successful clubs in that competition were Peñarol, Nacional, AC Milan, Real Madrid, and Boca Juniors. Now, the last Intercontinental Cup was played in 2004 because it was being replaced by the new Club World Cup that introduced club champions of all regions like CONCACAF, AFC, CAF, and OFC. Talks about this new tournament started off in the late 90s, but weren't put into play until 2005, when the Club World Cup most of us came to know was inaugurated and lasted until 2023. The most successful team in the Club World Cup was Real Madrid with 5 titles and Barcelona in second with 3. The most successful club outside of Europe, or UEFA, is Corinthians from Brazil, and they won this competition twice. Now, with the new competition starting in the summer of 2025, FIFA ran into a little bit of a problem. You can't have 2 Club World Cups. So what did they do? They quote-unquote brought back the Intercontinental Cup to replace the Club World Cup we've all come to know. But like I said earlier, it's literally the exact same tournament. The only difference is that they changed the name so that they could have the Club World Cup in the summer, which will be a massive 32-team tournament. I am going to reserve my comments on these extra tournaments and FIFA in general because they're not remotely positive, but I do hope this explanation has helped you guys understand it all. Now, before moving on to the greatest sporting event in history, we are going to look at the oldest sporting event in history, which of course are the Olympics. Again, massive shout out to this amazing museum for taking into account all aspects of the beautiful game. Most people would disregard the Olympics for not being a major trophy in football or just flat out forget about it, but not Legends, ladies and gentlemen. Football has been a part of every Summer Olympics except for the inaugural one in 1896 and the one in 1932. This is because the World Cup was introduced in 1930, so they decided not to include it in the Olympics to not take away from it. Here is an absolutely insane relic in football history, a Uruguayan jersey worn in the 1924 Olympics when Uruguay won the gold medal. Now, here's a hot topic that is debated to this day and you might find interesting. For those who haven't noticed, Uruguay uses 4 stars on their jerseys, and if you are the ones that have noticed, you're probably wondering to yourself, why would they do that? They only have 2 World Cups, don't they? Well, before the first World Cup in history in 1930, which Uruguay won by the way, there wasn't any international competition in place to decide what country would be the best in the world or who could really call themselves world champions. None except the Olympics, of course, which Uruguay won in 1924 and in 1928. And since the Olympics were officially recognized by FIFA in the 1920s, well, Uruguay believes that they are able to officially call themselves 4-time world champions. That's the reason there are 4 stars above their emblem on their national team jersey. I myself don't really know what to make of this. I think I'm leaning more towards Uruguay on this one, but let me know down below in the comments what you guys think because it certainly is a very interesting topic. Now, going back to the Olympic exhibit, you see many jerseys of past winners like Neymar's Brazil in 2016, Messi's Argentina in 2008, Carlitos Tevez in 2004, and of course, when speaking of football, you cannot leave out the beautiful and mystical land of Africa. Here are gold medal winners Cameroon and Nigeria in the year 2000 and 1996 respectively. Really cool stuff. Now finally, we get to the greatest sporting event in history, held every 4 years, the pinnacle of world football, the World Cup. After the success of football in Olympic tournaments, FIFA president then, Jules Rimet, was really pushing for a global international tournament outside of the Olympics. In May of 1928, the stage would finally be set for the World Cup, and since Uruguay had just won the last 2 Olympic gold medals, they decided to give them the honor of hosting the very first World Cup in history in 1930. Because of his push, influence, and essentially being the creator of the World Cup, the trophy was named to honor Jules Rimet. The Jules Rimet Trophy was the original trophy the world champions lifted from 1930 to 1970 before being replaced by the one we know today. Now, obviously, this trophy has a lot of history behind it, but you might be shocked to find out just how peculiar that history really is. Following the inaugural World Cup, it was held in Italy in 1934 in a World Cup filled with controversy, where Italy themselves would go on to win. In Italy, the Jules Rimet Trophy was hidden under a bed during World War II to keep it safe. In 1966, the Jules Rimet Trophy was stolen in London right before the World Cup started. Thankfully, a dog named Pickles found it before the first match day even began. Funny enough, England went on to win that World Cup and it remains as their only major tournament win. Maybe Pickles brought them luck. Good luck from a good boy. Then in 1970, after Brazil won their 3rd World Cup in history, FIFA decided to outright give them the Jules Rimet Trophy. However, unbelievably, the trophy was stolen for a 2nd time from the Brazilian Football Confederation's offices in 1983. And unlike the first time it was stolen, it was never recovered after this 2nd theft. Many people speculate that it was melted down to gold bars or jewelry after it was stolen, but that doesn't make much sense because the trophy itself wasn't made out of gold. I guess we'll never know what happened to it. Like I mentioned earlier, Uruguay would go on to win the first World Cup final in history against Argentina in the capital Montevideo, and they would win that game 4-2. And yes, this museum has jerseys from that final in their collection, of course. Absolutely unreal. Again, how on earth are they able to obtain these historic and legendary relics? Anyways, Uruguay would go on to win their 2nd World Cup in 1950 against Brazil, becoming the first and only team to beat Argentina and Brazil in a World Cup final. Speaking of 1950, that World Cup final against Brazil is infamously known as El Maracanazo, one of the darkest days in Brazilian football. In that tournament, there wasn't a knockout phase and the tournament was played more in like a league-style round-robin format. Brazil was the clear potential winner. The only team that could have possibly taken their title away was Uruguay. But the Brazilians were absolutely overwhelmingly confident because in the previous Copa America, they had beat Uruguay 5-1. They were clearly the better team, and more importantly, all Brazil had to do was not lose. If Uruguay somehow managed to tie the game, Brazil would still be crowned champions. To make matters even worse for Uruguay, Brazil would take the lead shortly after the second half started. Brazil was hosting the World Cup and they were playing this final against Uruguay in their football temple, one of the most, if not the most iconic stadiums in World Cup history, the Maracanã. The attendance was officially over 170,000 and it's to this day one of the most attended matches in football history. Brazilians were celebrating the entire day and preparations for the celebrations were heavily underway. However, in the last minutes of the game, Uruguay do the unthinkable and Juan Alberto Schiaffino and Alcides Gigia scored to complete a 2-1 comeback. At the final whistle, there was a disturbing and traumatic silence in the stadium. There were several casualties due to fights among fans, and some even rumored to have been from heart attacks in the stands, and a few people even ending everything due to the shock. The Brazilian team left the stadium in disguises, and Uruguay received the trophy quickly and unceremoniously because nothing was planned for their win. The event was so traumatic that Brazil retired the white colors they used that game and just recently brought them back as an away jersey in 2019. Again, very dark day in Brazilian football and the biggest upset in World Cup history. And of course, legends had the jerseys for that historic game as well somehow. Not to worry, my fellow Brazilian subscribers, Brazil is still the greatest footballing nation in history with a record 5 World Cups to their name. And if we're talking Brazilian football or just football in general, we can't go on without mentioning the king, Edson Arantes do Nascimentos, or you may better know him as Pelé. 3-time World Cup winner, inventor of the phrase "the beautiful game" to describe this sport, and regarded by many as the greatest player to have ever lived. Don't compare greats, just enjoy and appreciate them. Speaking of greats, another icon of the sport is Diego Armando Maradona, the most iconic number 10 in Argentinian football and possibly world football history, giving us one of the greatest individual performances in a World Cup when he gave Argentina their second World Cup in history in Mexico 1986. And since we're on Argentinian football, here is a player I greatly admire and is, in my opinion, the most important player in Argentina's national football history, the legendary Mario El Matador Kempes. If you know, you know. He gave Argentina their first World Cup in history in 1978, and to this day is the only player in World Cup history to win the Golden Boot, MVP, and World Cup in the same tournament. And you have many more amazing historical relics, like from possibly the second greatest nation in football history, Italy. And unbelievably, they have the infamous Roberto Baggio jersey that he wore in 1994 when he missed a penalty that gave Brazil the World Cup. Again, sorry for sounding like a broken record, but it is actually unbelievable how they're able to get all of this and how much history is in this Legends Museum. Now again, coming back to my side of the world, there is an amazing US relic from the World Cup 1950, and here is the greatest player in CONCACAF history, the Mexican icon Hugo Sanchez. Here's more US memorabilia with one of the most iconic jerseys of all time with the US 1994 World Cup jersey. And here's another beautiful US jersey and one of my personal favorites, used in 2002, where they made it all the way to the quarterfinals after eliminating eternal rivals Mexico in the round of 16. Which means that the only time USA and Mexico have faced off in a World Cup, not only did the US beat them, but they eliminated them and crushed their dreams of reaching the 5th game in a World Cup with a scoreline of 2-0. Sorry to my Mexico fans, I just simply had to put that on the record. As you keep going down this exhibit, you find more iconic jerseys throughout World Cup history, and you even find the suit that Maradona wore in the 2010 World Cup when he was the head coach of the Argentina national team. It keeps going through more iconic jerseys, some of my favorites being the Colombia and Costa Rica jersey from the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, and we go all the way down to the latest World Cup in Qatar 2022 when the GOAT finally conquered the world, giving Argentina their 3rd World Cup in history. Of course, we can't forget about the ladies as well. The first quote-unquote World Cup type tournament for the women's was played in Italy in 1970, where Denmark won. There were a few more unofficial tournaments played here and there, but after a lot of countries lifted their ban on women playing football in the 70s, there was a bigger push to have FIFA make an official World Cup for the women. In 1988, they held a women's invitation tournament in China, almost like a test run to see if a women's World Cup would be viable. Norway won that tournament, and after seeing how successful it was, an official World Cup was approved and set for 1991 in China as well. The US beat Norway 2-1 to become the first Women World Cup champions in history. The Women's World Cup is also played every 4 years, and as an American, I'm happy to say that the most successful team in Women's World Cup history is the US with a record 4 World Cups, and second is Germany with 2. Towards the end of the tour, you see more jerseys like one of the best midfielders in the world at the moment, Pedri. Here's the Prince Neymar, and of course you have the greatest players to have ever stepped foot onto the pitch, Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi. Nobody in the history of the game comes close to their longevity, individual records, and accolades. And speaking of accolades, another unreal things the Legends Museum experience offers is a chance to hold and take a picture with the famous Ballon d'Or. They really do just hand this out to anybody nowadays, huh? Jokes aside, it was an absolutely unreal experience. At the end of the tour, you can see one final film that summarizes your experiences, highlights the history of the beautiful game, and thanks you for your visit. If you're hungry afterwards, you can visit the rooftop bar on the 7th floor, but my wife and I decided to head out because we were pretty tired and just wanted to make it back to the hotel. But man, where do I even start with this museum? As a massive football fan and someone who collects football memorabilia of all kinds, this was an absolute dream come true. I really did feel like a kid inside a candy shop, and as crazy as it may seem, all the footage that you've seen so far probably doesn't even make up a third of what this museum offers you. I can't wait to come back and spend an entire day just observing and truly admiring each and every single thing. If you're a fan of the beautiful game and want to relive its magical moments and learn more about its rich history, this is absolutely the place to go. And with the amount of interactive exhibits and awesome 4D movie experiences, this museum can be awesome for anybody who isn't as big of a fan. But being a fan definitely makes the experience unreal. This was a 10 out of 10 in my book, and honestly, I'm shocked that this place isn't more famous than it is. I need it to be more famous so that others can enjoy an amazing experience like I did as well. If you get a chance to visit Madrid and are a massive football fan, you must absolutely visit here. Legends Home of Football is an unbelievable experience, and the name is adequate because this is truly the home of football. Thank you guys for sticking to the end of the video. It took a lot of research, but it was an absolute pleasure. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share with your football buddies. And if you'd like to see more content like this or stadium tours, please subscribe to my channel to see more. Thank you very much, you guys, and I hope to see y'all soon. Bye-bye.